We always like to end with an advertiser, to reflect on the themes of the day, to learn a little bit about how they're structuring this new form of media and communication in their own businesses. And I'm delighted to welcome our speaker, who is not only the CMO of a major global drinks company with brands including Absolute, which we see some fantastic work, but he's also the president of the World Federation of Advertisers, so involved in policy setting with regards to many media issues such as transparency and privacy right now. So it's fantastic that he's here. We can learn from him. Please welcome to the stage CMO of Pernod Ricard, Mr. Martin Riley, ladies and gentlemen.
So thank you, Charlie, and good evening, everybody. I don't want to keep you too long away from the cocktail hour on the bar, and I guess that's why I was put on at this stage, to just bring you down nicely into that hour. I wondered also whether it was the fact that, media lines are blurring, and blurring linked to alcohol. Perhaps there was some kind of underlying message there, but maybe that wasn't the case. But what I want to talk to you really about today is from an advertiser point of view, impacting through connecting. It's been the theme of everything we've seen today. Many of you media specialists, you know far more about it than I do. I'm just coming to you as the CMO of a major international group, and the kind of questions we ask ourselves and we ask our teams, and also because I've put this watch your tone. Watch your tone means if we're going to enter into a brand conversation, a dialogue, then we better make sure we've got the tone right and we're representing ourselves in a way that's appropriate and can be consistent. So as Charlie mentioned, I'm wearing two hats today because I'm fortunate enough as well to be the current president of the World Federation of Advertisers, following in the footsteps of illustrious people like Bernard Gluck, who I know is here and was president of the jury for the awards, the media awards. So what I wanted to do was just give you a very brief introduction into what our company is and what the WFA is doing before giving you some of the kind of questions that we're asking people like many of you here. So we're a global group with a number two, a global company in wines and spirits, Pernod Ricard. We're based in Paris. I'm based in Paris at the head office. Many of you might think what we do is focus on aniseed flavored drinks, the kind of thing you might indulge in when you go on holiday in the south of France. But in fact, we have a much wider range of brands than that, as Charlie mentioned. Absolute Vodka and Chivas Regal being our two iconic brands that we sell everywhere, and we promote everywhere, and we invest in everywhere. But then we have 7 other premium international brands, some of which will, I'm sure, be familiar to you, in brands such as Jameson, for example, and Beefeater Gin. And we have 5 prestige brands, as we define them, like luxury brands, the Glenlivet Single Malt, and a 21-year-old whiskey called Royal Salute, as well as champagnes like Belle Epoque and Martel Cognac. And we have 4 global wine brands that we promote, primarily New World wines, but also Spanish wines. And then we have 18 key local brands. So the whole basis of the business has been building up from strong local brands and acquiring big international brands that we can put onto the back of that distribution that we have for the strong local brands. But from a marketing and communication point of view, media point of view, obviously, some of the approaches are different depending on whether they're fully global brands, iconic brands, or local brands. So we think we're quite different in the way we operate. We have the broadest portfolio within the drinks business. We believe very strongly in premiumization. We've been following this strategy now for a number of years, and we also believe very strongly in innovation, to the point that Forbes magazine ranked us as the number 15 company in the world in terms of innovation 2 years ago, which we were delighted to receive that accolade. We're decentralized, so we believe in being entrepreneurial and closest to the consumer in all our markets. And we have a corporate culture that's very people-oriented, and we try to build ambassadors for our brands amongst the 19,000 people that are employed. the founder of the Ricard brand had a motto, which was "Make a friend a day." It was the first example, probably, of social networks face-to-face, telling his sales teams to go around to bars and talk to people directly to understand what their motivation was, why they were drinking Ricard, how often they came to the bar, etc. That kind of thing, believe it or not, we still do. We send out our teams once a month in a semi-kind of structured way to go and talk to people in situ, in the place where they're drinking our brands, to find out directly what they think about them, how they drink them, how they mix them, what information they require from us, and not relying entirely on traditional market research. And the core value of the group is, in fact, conviviality. That is, getting together around a good bottle of wine or a good glass of whiskey or absolute vodka, as people have done over the centuries in terms of part of the human experience in enhancing that human interaction. Now, the WFA may be well known to most of you. It incorporates 70 of the world's biggest marketeers, advertisers, and the membership of that has doubled over the past 6 years. So it's companies from all different sectors, from all different markets, parts of the world. One of the great advantages of the WFA is that it brings together best-in-class forums. And the ones listed here are the most important ones. CMOs, where again, CMOs, senior companies can talk together very openly about global marketing issues. But there's also the media and digital forum, which again are very important in terms of trying to navigate our way through and talking together on a peer-to-peer basis about some of these key questions that are challenging to us. Now, agencies, by the way, do not form part of the membership of the WFA. It's composed of these global marketing companies, these advertisers, and national advertiser associations, of which there are 55. And I know there are some people here today from Brazil, for example, from the National Advertiser Association. Now, just to give you an idea, in these forums where we discuss key issues, the one for media, it will come as no surprise that a lot of what has been talked about today is clearly top of mind and of greatest importance for the members of these digital forum. So transparency, this is out of 5, by the way. Transparency, new trading models, return on investment, trading desks, all the changes that are taking place. Again, the WFA is asking questions. We have not taken a position because we're trying to find out more, but it's a great opportunity for marketers from these leading global advertisers to get together and discuss. So let me move on and say, obviously I prepared this presentation before today, but I was delighted to see that so many of the questions that I'd asked in the presentation that come from both the WFA and from my role as CMO Pernod Ricard when I talk to our marketing teams right around the world, is we all know we're living through a revolution. We all know the whole business, all our businesses, not just media, but all our businesses are being profoundly impacted by digitization. But when we come to invest and when we come to develop content, etc., what really are the chances of getting noticed? I mean, it's my key question that, yes, if I'm a fan of Chivas Regal or Absolute, and I'm already engaged, I'm probably going to get a lot of content sent to me. I'm probably going to go on the YouTube channel that we've developed for the brands. I'm probably going to be enriched by all the experiences that we're putting together, either through our own creation or co-creation or even curation. But if I'm not really yet into the brand, or not to that degree, how do I know what's going on if I'm focused only on the digital space? So of course we have to stand back, and marketing, as you know, is all about taking the consumer point of view. I mean, we represent the consumer in the boardroom. We're always coming back to what is the frame of mind of the consumer. Of course we can all talk about numbers, and we can all talk about big data and big budgets and big numbers and all the subjects that we've been talking about today. But at the same time, we have to say, what frame of mind is the consumer in when we're actually talking to him or her? And in our kind of business, when it's wines and spirits, as you would know, there are certain times of the day where you're not really very receptive to certain, let's say, advertising messages or brand content regarding what may be whiskey or gin, for example. So let's put ourselves in the consumer's position. We know from eye tracking that a lot of work that's available on social media, people are not really looking at the advertising that's coming in. It may be seen to be intrusive, it may be interruptive. You talk to millennials, I have 4 of them myself, ask them what do they think about advertising in their digital space, on their social networks, and the answer is pretty negative, unless it's bringing something that enhances the conversation they're having or the brand experience for a brand they're really interested in. And I guess most of us might agree with this quote that intrusion is a totally dead model. Well, yes and no, but again, if we're trying to impact on people and make them aware of something that they may not be aware of, we have to intrude in some way. And we know that TV, for example, is very efficient in some ways. You know what you're getting, you're paying for it, but you actually are getting the traditional measures of how many people are going to be seeing your message. It's maybe more potluck in some other media, but I also agree that the sweet spot in to some degree may be outdoor and radio as means of driving people onto the digital space to find out more. I mean, I was talking to a member of the Italian Association who said they've done some work to show that radio and internet and digital are very effective because you consume radio, not deliberately, it's on in the background, but it can actually drive you to a space, a digital space where there's more information. I think the same thing of outdoor. As Bob Pittman was saying, outdoor imposes itself. It's there in the street, it's there at a bus shelter, you can't avoid it. And if you can make it interactive and more digital, actually, it could be very effective in combining that with the work that you're putting onto the digital space, onto social networks. So in our view, we don't believe TV is dead. Well, we saw the figures as well this morning from Steve King in terms of the projection of TV spending. And I can tell you, when you work in a sector that is restricted, and when you don't automatically have access to TV, which is increasingly the case for wines and spirits around the world, you hold on to TV for as long as you can because you know it can deliver. Not alone. Yes, there's wastage. Yes, it's more difficult to target, but it has a very important role to play in our view. But it's actually all about, in our view, looking at the consumer journeys and, in fact, where you get your messages from. You know, so a bar, in our case, is actually a very important outlet for people to receive messages about our brands. In fact, for all the research we do, the most important single influencer is word of mouth. You probably all have experiences of when a friend or a family member introduced you to a certain brand of vodka or whiskey or wine. And you probably remember that moment, and if you enjoyed that experience, you probably told your friends, in the real space or in the digital space. So what we have to do is make people aware of what we can offer them, drive them to a space of brand content where they can find out more, because people want to know more about how whiskey is made, how it's matured, how cognac's made and matured, to have social currency, to talk to their friends, whether in a bar or in social networks. Having social currency, understanding about liquor brands is actually something that people of all ages, but the young adults appreciate very much. So we need to understand what is this consumer journey. We can't do everything, and also we have a rule, just because we can doesn't mean we should. Because unless we really do understand the insight that data can bring, and that digital is bringing us, the ability to listen, to understand conversations, but to translate that into insight and then act upon it. Unless we're doing that, then we're being somewhat random and we're not investing properly. And when we see headlines in the grocer, again, about some of us in the UK, some leading FMCG companies moving more into television and away from the digital space, maybe it's short-lived, but it demonstrates to us that the interconnection of different media, different messaging, different times, and certainly for different brands, is the key to understanding how best to invest our money. And look at this rather random chart, perhaps, but it shows that the consumer experience is not linear anymore. Where we pick up information, again, it's going to be different depending on the level of involvement people have with different brands, but most people do have quite a high level of involvement with brands such as vodka, whiskey, cognac, etc., because they matter. They're brands that you consume in public. They're brands you may give as a gift. You very rarely consume them on your own, whether at home or in a bar. So these brands say quite a lot about you. So understanding that people should feel comfortable and confident in their brand choice is obviously very important. And we have to follow that thinking and that route and that understanding from consumers by recognizing that different touch points have a different role to play, both in the real world as well as in the digital space. Now, we heard this morning from David about the importance of influencer marketing. This is something we do believe strongly in. The power of advocacy, as I mentioned before, word of mouth is absolutely critical. In fact, the company, going back to the 1930s in France when Ricard first developed, was all about advocacy, was in fact playing a role in local communities throughout France and interest groups, whether it was supporters of rugby, music, etc., or art, building communities where Ricard, the brand, had a key role to play in bringing people together around the brand. And in fact, that's exactly what we're now seeking to do with all our brands in all our markets. So it's a real shift away from the mass marketing, albeit recognizing there is a need to generate awareness for people to drive them into different spaces, but actually putting more effort and more focus into what we call influencer marketing. And we have 3 levels of that in terms of the Crusaders, the strategic target, and then the consumption pool. And how we manage those 3, which are interconnected, with a message which should be consistent, because brands have values, brands are personalities, and therefore they need to behave in a fairly consistent way. But what you say to whom, when, and on what media can change. And that's what this simple model is about. Crusaders can be very high-profile people, as we have with people like Kevin Spacey or Lady Gaga, who are very much advocates for the brand Jameson Irish whiskey. In fact, the Crusaders have been barmen in America with this brand, whose epicenter really is Brooklyn, in Williamsburg, where the barmen adopted this brand as their own, tattooed themselves with the brand name and with the symbols of the brand, became advocates, talked to people, and Lady Gaga was first introduced to it in Manhattan, in fact, at a bar in Lower Manhattan by a barman who was an advocate. And she has taken it with her ever since. And she tweets about it regularly, as does Kevin Spacey. And the strategic target, we have a broader target we call the dudes, the kind of people you will find in Brooklyn, the kind of people who are in every city in America, and in fact we found them all over the world, from Tokyo to Bangkok, to Bogota, to Manchester. You can find these people who actually have the same characteristics and profiles as the core group to whom we've talked and worked with in Brooklyn. And then the consumption pool is influenced by both of these, and of course is much broader. And just as an example for Jameson, we found that in Israel there was a fan of Jameson and also a fan of surfing, a very well-known model, Bar Raffaelli, and Jameson sent her a surfboard branded with Jameson on her birthday. And she tweeted to this. She was delighted. It was a surprise. And all her followers received tweets and retweeted, etc. So Again, examples we've seen before during the course of the day. It's something we found to be very impactful. So she would be a key crusader. Here, the strategic target, the dudes from Brooklyn and Brooklyn-type places around the world, we get to know them individually. We organize events with them. We exchange and have conversations with them on a regular basis in the real world as well as in the digital space. And we deep dive into that target, so we really do understand. And again, digital is giving us a great possibility to really get to know people as individuals and to understand the motivation and the insight behind these targets. And it's not just, if you like, the young dudes of Brooklyn and elsewhere. Actually, if you take a brand like Chivas Regal in Spain, which is more mature and has a broader target group, if you like, Chivas Regal has positioned itself amongst people who are interested in country sports, country pursuits, but who live in big cities like Madrid and Barcelona, and brought these people together, so not only through the digital space, but actually by organizing events. So we are using digital in a way that actually can identify interests and linked interests of different types of consumers, where the brand can play a role. But I think crucially, because of our learning over the years in how we built brands and how they've occupied a position in the social space, we recognize it needs to be in the real world. We need to organize real events. We need to get to know real people who can be crusaders or part of the strategic target for us and talk about the brand online, and not just be community managers who work only online in terms of connecting with people. And we've heard also today about in-the-moment experiences. We have a website which I encourage you all to visit, because Rome is included in that site, and it's called worldsbestbars.com. Worldsbestbars.com is, if you like, a listing site, but it has some very strict criteria. It's not every bar in every city. It is the best. So if you want to go to the best cocktail bars, you want to understand the kind of atmosphere you will find there, speciality of those bars, if it's mixing great mojitos or dry martinis or whiskey sours, then this is done by independent third parties. And we are developing the site to actually make it more interactive. But it is the most visited site of all bar listings in the world. And I'm sure all your home cities are covered on it. Certainly London, New York has huge coverage, but I checked earlier on today, and Rome is well represented. So that's in the moment experience. You're there, you've arrived in a new city, you've got your tablet or your mobile phone, and what do you want to do? You want to know where to go of an evening in a new city and find out about the kind of bars that are there and how to get there and what you will find once you get there. So this is something that, in fact, we've developed over the last 10 years. It is independent, but clearly there is a reference to several of our brands on that site. But that's an example where we think mobile content has a role to play, and we can provide a service. The same is true, for example, of our wine brands. If you are going in a store, you're looking for a bottle of wine for tonight's dinner, you've got an idea what you're going to be serving as your main course, for example, but you're not too clear what kind of wine is appropriate to serve with it. There in the moment, in front of the shelf, you can get information, QR codes or information delivered to you regarding the kind of wines that we have available, the grape varieties that are there, how best they can be enjoyed with different dishes. And again, the point has been made before, this was an example from the Oscars in 2013, but how to integrate, how really, if you're using mainstream media, how you can drive people to individual sites to start a conversation through social media, through Facebook, etc., to actually get people commenting and responding. So, the question that I ask our teams within Pernod Ricard is, okay, do you really understand what brand conversation is? Do you really understand what brand content is? And do you really understand what a consumer or a person, because we like to talk about people, feels about brand experience, because we use these words quite loosely often. And we've had some good, sharper definitions today, some good examples from David earlier on. But in terms of brand conversation, I think the real challenge here is adopting a tone of voice that's appropriate for the brand. And if you have a conversation with somebody, you have to show part of your personality. You have to respond to what the other person is saying to you. But you have to do it in a way that is pretty consistent over time. You have to develop the personality that people will recognize. And our brands are all seen, because of the way people regard spirits, as having personalities. So the people you put on this have to really have a deep understanding of the brand, have to be able to engage in a way that's quite meaningful, have to have content there they can talk about and really understand, and have to have a memory, because you don't want to keep repeating yourself. It's like anybody who you have a conversation with. If that person just repeats himself and he's only got one subject of conversation, his favorite football team, pretty soon, you know, if you're talking to somebody at a bar, you get tired and you want to move on. And here with the brand, we want to engage people in conversation of things that matter to the recipient as well. And brand content. Let's define what's in there, something that's really of interest. It can be about the brand itself, because I said it's currency, to understand about why a 12-year-old whiskey is different from a regular whiskey, why a single malt is different from a blend, why cognacs are called XO and VSOP, all this kind of thing. Huge appetite for that kind of content. How do you make a cocktail? How do you use Absolute to make the Absolute Greyhound, for example? This is information that people are very hungry about, that again, by going and talking to people in places they're consuming our brands, we find out. This is the kind of brand content. It doesn't have to always be great entertainment. There can be part of that. It can be curated. There can be stuff out there on the web that we can use because it's relevant to what we believe in terms of our main point of view as a brand. But also it can be information that's relevant to the use of that brand. And brand experience that is relevant for the brand and the brand's point of view, which can be remarkable and can be reactive, as David said this morning. This is, for example, Havana Club, one of our brands of a Cuban rum, where we gave people the chance to actually win a gap year. And the basis of that was they had to say how they were going to use the gap year, and the fact they were going to produce every day a report and a blog on Facebook, photographs, Instagram of their gap year when they were traveling, first of all, from Havana around the world to places of their choice. Something that people would find relevant and interesting. So just to conclude, some examples from Pernod Ricard. So Absolute Greyhound, when we launched this commercial with Swedish House Mafia, which was a way of introducing one of their new tracks. Obviously, we used Shazam as a way of people being able to find out more and also to win a VIP experience. So a short extract. And then a final example from Ballantine's, again, one of our international whiskey brands, the #2 whiskey brand in the world, who've developed an OS t-shirt. And again, an example of the medium becoming the message. What we wanted to do, because it's got quite a young profile, a young adult profile of drinkers around Europe, to develop something that would really capture the attention, recognizing the importance of interaction and communication for this group. And I'll show you a short film.
o melhor programa de televisão de todos os tempos.
Check this out. The world's first T-shirt that you can actually program.
在 T 恤上面能够上社群网站跟朋友互动。
So we know wearable technology is the next new big thing. It's featured a lot in South by Southwest, but this is already up and running. It's quite expensive at the moment, and we're hoping to bring the cost down, but there's a lot of interest right around the world. And it is actually washable, so it has practical value as well. So in summary, really, what I wanted to say is, of course, we all know there are many choices, and we all have to be selective in terms of how we use media. I actually believe the role of the media planner, pure media planner, is going to be crucially important. And the big question is whether we take on more expertise in-house or we work with our agencies more in terms of this understanding of the planning aspect, in particular between classic media and, let's say, digital space. Always start from the consumer. I mean, that's what marketing has to do. And does all the data that we're getting, the big data, actually give us better insights? Because we know we can drown in it if we're not careful. Do we use the data we already have to maximum effect? Question mark. Challenge for our marketing teams. But we should challenge ourselves to ensure that the level of data we can have access to gives us better insights to make better decisions. And let's think through, what are we asking consumers to do? We heard about transactions, heard about e-commerce this morning. I think ultimately that is where we're heading in terms of saying, yes, we want to engage you. Yes, we want to build a relationship. We want you to become advocates. But actually, ultimately, maybe the final transaction is that we may one day want to sell you a bottle. And we want to obviously use all the opportunities around us in a sensible and coherent way, understanding the consumer journey. So thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy your cocktails after this session. Thank you.